Hello, and welcome to the Student Experience podcast, where we'll be chatting to members of the University of Suffolk community, giving them the opportunity to share their experience with us. I'm Sam, and I'm a member of the Student Experience team, and in today's episode, we're joined by Stacy Ashley, who is the District Nursing Postgraduate Diploma course lead. We discussed the District Nursing course available at the university, opportunities for students after graduating, and Stacey's journey to becoming a lecturer. So, Stacey, thanks for joining us today. Would you like to firstly introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm Stacy Ashley and I'm the course lead for the District Nursing Specialist Qualification, PG Cert DIP, whichever you want to call it, certificate basically, in Advanced Clinical Practice with District Nursing.
Brilliant. So would you like to give us a bit of an overview about the course from when they start through to when they sort of graduate?
Yeah. So we're a bit different. We don't do a September to September roll, so we're actually March to March. And that's to sort of be in line with Higher Education England funding, because the course is actually funded by the government because we need more clinical practitioners out in the community. So basically the induction usually starts on the last week of March. And then you have 4 weeks back in your job.
Okay.
And then you start the course. You start with the care coordination module. So that's 3 weeks because we do block blend learning. And the aim is you could just focus on that. You don't have to worry about starting your leadership or any sort of placement practices. And then you can be assessed before you go out into practice. So you start off with your care coordination module and then you run straight into practice after that. So your practice blocks about 8 weeks in the beginning where you meet your new area, because the students that we get have been working in areas for who knows how long, depends how long is a piece of string. So then they get moved to a separate area that they don't know the people, so they can try and figure out how to work in a team of professionals that they don't know, that they can't see them as someone who's trying to study, as rather than respecting the role that they're in. So they'll do that for 8 weeks and then come back to us for the leadership module and then go back out into practice for Christmas, and then again back to us for a little bit for V300, which is the nurse prescribing module, which you can obviously that runs for about 6 months. So I think that one really does sort of take over, and then back out into practice again before they finish in March. So it's quite a layered course, is what I would say. Certainly can be quite tricky to wrap your head around when you haven't actually seen anyone do it. So we do sort of recommend talking to people who've done the course prior, so you can start to sort of figure out what it is you actually are going to be doing, because it's very different for every person, because we focus on a postgraduate course, so everyone has their own different learning needs. Some people might be very good at one thing, so they need to focus on other areas, and obviously everything's sort of dictated by the NMC of what we need to achieve by the end of the year, because it's only a year program. So it's quite intense, quite full on.
And what sort of students or potential students would this sort of appeal to?
Yeah, so this is postgraduate. This is generally people who've been out in the community, though we are now, that remit's still always there, but we are trying to get self-funders, because generally what happens now is you get an organisation. We cover 4 local organisations here. We've obviously got Ipswich, Colchester, West Suffolk area, sort of Lowestoft and Norfolk area, and people apply to their employers to go on the course. So the employers put out an expression of interest because they apply for the funding from Health Education England. Then the nurses who are interested apply, and they have to go through quite an exciting interview process. Not quite, your standard interview process where the university sort of interviewing pre-reg and they're sort of interviewing you back. It's more like a full-on job interview with presentations, skills, and all of that involved. And then you get the university interview as well, just for extra added fun. But, it doesn't put people off. You have to be really dedicated and keen to do the role, because of the enhanced clinical practice you can achieve at the end of it. You can prescribe, you can assess people in their own home, you can do everything. You're a one-stop shop to treating people successfully in their own home and well, and running a team, because that's what you're going to have to do as well. Okay. Anyway, so they've done their interview process with with their employers and me. They've survived their panel, and then they're sort of enrolled on if they've passed. So generally, depends on the employer size. They get like an allotted amount of people they can send. Generally, the bigger areas get about 4 or so people. Then the smaller ones get 2 that they can get funding for. So once they've hopefully filled that criteria, then up they come to us. So yeah, it's quite an interesting process. Very different to doing pre-reg stuff.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, I mean, of course, there's a lot of placements that's involved in the course. So how, in terms of when they're at university, how can they expect to be assessed?
Yeah, so it's, again, quite an interesting one. So the course used to be, it's never really been fully online. Obviously, COVID made it online for a while. And we got a lot of feedback from people saying that that was just not the way forward, because actually it's a small cohort on average. It's sort of 15 or less people. So you do quite a lot of trauma bonding, for want of a better word. Right. So they wanted to do that in real life. So obviously, if you're coming from Norfolk and stuff, during the interview process, we make it explicitly clear that for 2 to 3 days a week whilst they're in university placement, they'll have to be travelling down to us so they can all trauma bond together and hopefully learn stuff from the lectures. And so when it comes to assessments itself, obviously the practice assessments, they stay within the same area, but their trust provider, who their employer is, moves them from area to area. So if you're in Norfolk, there's probably about 5 or 6 different areas you can move to within Norfolk. And they try and, on average, say, not more than an hour's travel to get to work. Because I think that's kind of the standard. Yeah. You don't want to go more than an hour. Yeah. So to meet their sort of placement criteria, they're travelling to a different area, but it's still within their employment, their organisation. They do get a week of alternative practice where they can go anywhere else in the country if they wanted and go and study district nursing there for a week. Wow. Obviously, setting that up is down to the person. So it can be a bit tricky, but then they also do other things like spending a week with paramedics, because obviously we work very closely with them, or advanced care practitioners, because again, we work very close with them. So you can kind of select where you go. It's quite a lot of freedom in that way.
That's brilliant. So in terms of, the course at this university compared to maybe some other universities, are there any sort of unique selling points? Maybe the smaller cohort size, is that one?
Well, that is one, but to be fair, across the country, it's quite small cohort sizes. But I've already mentioned it a little bit, to be honest. It's coming in and being together in real life, because I know one of our sort of local universities down the road-ish, they do it all online. So you sort of lose that personable element and getting to know your colleagues, because it's also networking, if you think about it. You're learning what other people do in other areas. That conversation happens more naturally when you're in a room chatting about whatever you want to chat about, government providers, because every area is different of what's provided. Cancer services in Norfolk are different to those in Suffolk. So those sort of conversations happen more freely. And we also do a lot, especially within the care coordination module, a lot of guest speakers, so from different areas. So, for example, from the ICB, who are the people who sort of fund and decide where the money gets spent within healthcare, they come in and chat to us. Or if I can get someone from social services to talk about complex case management, and various other ones. And I'm also trying to get local practice partners, which are the sort of people who employ the students and that sort of thing, to come in and talk about their specific areas. So it makes it more relatable to the students whilst they're doing their study. Yeah.
So I know at the university of the wonderful health and wellbeing building. Yeah. So
we've got a whole little fake flat, which is actually quite well decked out. I'm a little bit jealous about it, if I'm honest. That we can use for simulation replicas. So we've got the mannequin that can be fully interactive. I love him, but he's a bit creepy, I won't lie. When he's blinking at you and breathing at you, you think, oh, you're quite real. So sort of getting over that is quite intense. But once you have, he's really good for doing like physical assessments and stuff that we have to do, but also making it a bit more relatable than doing an award, because obviously we don't deal with awards, we deal with people's homes. To sort of add an element, or you can do an angry relative or a scared relative, all those sort of things, just to make it a bit more natural for the people who are trying to produce as future district nurses. We want it to be as natural as you can get within an unnatural sort of situation. It seems to me. So we do have our fake flat. We've got the mannequin chap, who I don't think has a name, which I feel he should. Definitely a he. And then we've also got VR, virtual reality goggle things. So the premise of using those would be to sort of get students to focus on conflict resolution. There are lots of different packages you can do, leadership, etc. But the conflict resolution ones for our students specifically are the ones that we'll be using going forward, because actually having those conversations are really tricky. But if you can get feedback on how you delivered yourself, how you presented yourself in a VR sense, then you're not upsetting anyone for a start. You're not finding out in practice that maybe you need to work on a few things. So the VR has been really good with regards to that. And we also have the fake courtroom in the main building. Yeah. So I know that the apprenticeship nursing students have been using that to sort of set up a fake nursing midwifery council hearing. And that's something that we're going to be sort of looking at with regards to the district nursing. Not that we want to scare them into anything, but it's a heck of a long way to travel down to London for a day to watch, a real one. Yeah. So if we can replicate it here, especially for those who live at the top of Norfolk, etc. If we can replicate that here, just so they get a sense of the idea of what could be happening because of the current NMC regulations, where there's just so many people being sort of escalated to them for review, so they know sort of what to expect if it was ever asked of them to go. Just prepare them for those sort of things as well, the unpreparable situations, to try and help with that, really. So there's a lot here to actually try and replicate elements of practice that would be really beneficial that you wouldn't necessarily even get to see in real life.
So you mentioned that in one of the universities close to us only has online, so those facilities, are they sort of unique to?
I'd say that they're unique. Obviously I haven't attended the online course, as I am now a qualified district nurse and have been for a while, but I don't think they would take me. But I can't imagine that translating well in a virtual sense, if I'm honest.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I suppose nursing is a people person career. So the more in-person opportunities you have, the better.
It's very person-centred, and people are very variable. So you have to sort of work with the variations you get, and it doesn't usually work well online, what I've noticed. Anyway.
So on top of all that, I know the university provides a lot of support for students as and when they need it. So could you chat a bit about the support that they can have while they're studying?
Yeah, well, certainly within the district nursing course, we tend to get the student support wellbeing services in on our induction week, and we bring them in again during our care coordination module, just to ensure that everyone's aware of how to ask for help if they don't know how to. It's quite a personal roller coaster if you do realise that you do need support, and sometimes you don't actually realise it, and then you go out to practice and someone's like, have you ever thought of getting looked at or supported? And then they're like, oh really, okay, and then you come back and you're like, can I access student support? Yes, of course you can. All those sort of things. So it's making sure it's open and obvious for them. Obviously the district nursing students themselves, they have to go into practice, and if they do have any reasonable adjustments and stuff, they have to declare it to their practice supervisor and their practice assessor, so they can have those reasonable adjustments following them into practice, which is fabulous. And also of the demographic of my students, generally a lot of them haven't actually studied at level 6 before, so they go from a level 5 to a level 7 course, which is quite a leap. Yeah. So we have quite a lot of lovely library services, and I again bring them in quite early on in the induction into the care coordination module, and also into the leadership module for sort of how to research and do research and undertake literature reviews, because that is a massive element. And if you haven't done anything like that, terrifying, of course, is what I can safely say. So we haven't got a lot of facilities to support students in that way.
Do you have, I know at the university for the undergraduate courses, we have personal academic coaches.
Yeah.
So is that something
So I'm the course lead, I'm the PAC. Yeah. I am the person for the district nursing course. I don't really have a team. I've got other course module leaders that sort of support, as in the V300 and the holistic assessment. I do have a wonderful district nurse trained colleague called Jenny, and she very, very kindly has been running the course for the year, in between having proper course leads, appointed, and she's fabulous. So having an extra district nurse around just to bounce ideas off, like when you think of a brilliant idea, you're like, is that going to work? Is it going to work in a classroom? I don't know. Let's ask someone. She's there for me to ask. But yeah, so I am the personal academic coach. With regards to how often we meet, it's when the students need me, they email me, and I will happily set a meeting up if I can that day, or if so that week. And we also have sort of set meeting points whilst they're in their practice placement to make sure that all their paperwork for practice, because the document is huge, is all sort of being achieved in a manageable way, because some people like to either sort of run into it and then get overwhelmed, or they're very relaxed about it at the end get very overwhelmed. So it's sort of like a progress check. So we do that every placement whilst they're sort of midpoint, just to ensure everything's ticking along. And then towards the end again, before they have to submit their giant portfolio, more meetings that involve their sort of supervisors and assessors as well, just to make sure that they're tracking along nicely.
So you touched on it a little bit earlier about the block and blend approach over at the university. So for those that are listening that maybe don't know what that is, could you chat a bit about that and how that varies and maybe the pros of having this approach? Yeah, so the block and blend approach is sort of like a concentrated module. So whereas before you'd have like a full semester, which is quite lengthy, of a couple of modules running at once, we sort of condense it down so you can focus on one area. So for example, we'll start with the care coordination module. That's only 3 weeks. And when you think about how much you can fit in, sort of when I've been looking at the sort of itinerary, it's jam-packed. You could easily stretch that out to 12-week period. But it then starts to lose its potency, its sort of effect. So by having it within that 3-week period, and also putting the onus of the pre-reading on the student. So when you come to lectures, you've sort of done the pre-reading, you're ready, and you can have really good conversations, really sort of get down to the brass tacks of whatever you're discussing, whether it be complicated care of a patient with leg ulcers, or complicated care of those who are dying, or how to manage a tricky staff member. If you come with all of those ideas in mind, you're going to have a much more fruitful experience within the lectures, because I'm very, as you can tell, chat away. Delivering lectures and content they've sort of done before. You can go over so many leadership modules, but how more effective is it to discuss about the actual people in real life? So it's all about equating the theory and then linking it into the practice that they've had, the experiences they've had. And if they haven't had enough of those, because they've only been qualified for 5 or 6 years, whatever, I can happily fill in any blanks. Yeah. We've got loads of examples we could use. It's a whole catalogue of them. So yes, that's sort of the what's out there. One of the great ways for students to find out more about courses at university is coming to open days. Oh, yeah. So could you chat a bit about maybe some of the questions that they might ask and maybe some of the answers that you give? Well, so for district nursing students specifically, they don't really get the open days. Okay. So I have to catch them when they're coming in as pre-reg. Okay. So it's your usual standard pre-reg questions, sort of, what's nursing like, and how is it like nursing in the community? Because obviously when you get a lot of pre-reg nurses through, they don't actually think about the community too much, because we're sort of like the hidden
hidden service. You only need us when we're like Batman of services. You only see us when you need us, and then you kind of try and forget us once we've left. Because we see primarily housebound patients and stuff, so we're not really sung about in the news or anything like that. However, the government models are to be doing more community care, so we can make A&Es lighter. So you'd think there'd be a bit more excitement about us, but there you go, we'll get there. That's my own bugbear. But it's sort of explaining to them that your day can be different, and I mean incredibly different, by minute to minute. So you can plan to go in and see somebody that should, in theory, only take 30 minutes because you're doing whatever little task you have to do, as well as looking at them as a whole. But then suddenly they become very unwell. You need to try and sort them out. They don't want to go to hospital. You have to get doctors involved, that sort of thing. Or that their dog has managed to hit their tail on the side of the door and it's bleeding everywhere. And you have to figure out how to bandage a dog's tail, which I can say is very tricky because they will fall off. So I've got to give kudos to any veterinary nurses out there who can do it, because it's tricky.
Yeah.
But your day is so varied, and it might be that the patient's not even there when you go in through the door, and you're dealing with the relative because they don't know what's been going on. And when you find out that it's okay to speak to them because actually they're designated next of kin, etc., you can sort of reassure them that we'll try and take care of them as best we can, sort of thing. So it's explaining how different community is, and then I go on to how great being district nurse is. I won't lie, to try and get them to sort of think about where they're going to go, because you do your whole 5-year plan, where they're going to go in 10, where they're going to go in 20, So it is certainly a career path for them to start thinking about early on.
So students, prospective students, they've looked into the course at university, they've listened to this, they've looked on the website, maybe they've spoken to you. Yeah. And when they're submitting an application, what sort of advice do you have for them to give them the best chance?
Well, obviously to impress their employer. Yes, because they have to apply through their employer primarily. Yeah. It's to sort of sell how they're going to use those skills as much as humanly possible to benefit their job, their role. The students that we've interviewed this year have all been very focused on, how this job is going to improve their practice. Mm-hmm. They're not sort of talking about, I want to fly up the management ladder. I want to do this, I want to do that. They're like, I actually just want to walk into a patient's house, be able to assess and diagnose them correctly for a chest infection, for example, and actually prescribe the treatment while I'm there. So they just want to be a utilised member of the team. They want to use all these new skills that they will get and use them effectively to save the NHS time, to save them time. I'm not going to lie, it will save you, apart from getting the prescribing stuff done, it's going to save you a heck of a lot more time in the long run. And that whole sort of circle of care is complete. You don't have any broken bits waiting for information, so that patient is getting treated on time and cared for in the right place, because they don't necessarily need to go to hospital. But if they hadn't received the antibiotics from the GP that same night, it could have deteriorated and then gone in the next day. Can avoid all that. So that's a big thing that these students have been sort of feeding back through their interviews that they've been having with us. And that's what I'd say, try and put that in the application, because you have to do a long statement about why you want to do it. And you have to have your manager then approve the statement with an even longer statement about why you should do it. So putting that sort of information in the statement is possibly the best way to get the application going.
So if we move one step on through the process, so as a student they've been accepted onto the course, they're looking forward to joining us. Yeah. Is there any advice you'd have for them before they start?
The first thing I'd say is don't worry, you will get the timetable. I always get asked about that straight off the bat. And because different trusts do different timeframes for interviewing, like we started interviewing in September, my last one was the end of January. So it's a huge period. So those students who were selected in September to go on, they're sort of champing at the bit. They're ready to go. Yeah. So it's just, it will all flow. It will all happen. The induction week is there for them to ask any questions. Pre-reading, I'll be giving them reading lists, but I won't make it too excessive. I'm also quite into alternative reading lists with YouTube videos, podcasts, that sort of thing, just to try and make life easier. So I'd say just enjoy the 2 weeks holiday you get before you start, and then get into it and just enjoy it. Don't have many reservations. Obviously you have your professionalism to uphold, but it's a safe space. We want to talk about all the terrible things that you experience, because we want to try and unpack all of that, make sense of it, and then put it back into a nice suitcase, so then they've got all these tools that they can just pull out and sort whatever problem they're going to find on the day out.
Yeah.
So just relax a bit, it'll be fine.
Yeah. So leading on nicely from that is when students are, when they start in their course and they're doing their course, have you got any advice for them to really get the most out of their time whilst they're with us?
Yeah, I mean, utilisation of time. Make sure your timekeeping is on point. I know it's really hard, but we do sessions about timekeeping in the induction and again the care coordination module, just to really drive home the point that they are studying quite an intense course in a year. They're doing V300 prescribing, which is 6 months in itself. They're doing a holistic assessment, again, which is a huge module to undertake. It's learning every system, every little bit of the system, and then proving that you can do the assessment of every little bit of the system, as well as your leadership module, which again is research-based, but then you have to take a project into practice and prove to your employers that your project plan was perfect. I mean, it's all a lot of stuff. So yeah, timekeeping, but also utilising the WhatsApp group. You make the whole point of you coming in and us having this whole, selling point of being face to face and human contact is when you're out on practice and you're on your own, you feel like you're an island. There are, at this point, 8 other students feeling the same thing at the exact same time. And, everyone who's supporting them on the course, generally, the supervisors and assessors have done the course, and they all say, yes, you can do it, it is hard. So use the WhatsApp groups, and, obviously in a responsible way, to get support and say when you're not coping. And if it's getting to the stage where you're not coping, then contact me. That's why I'm here. To help.
Yeah, of course. So once students have graduated, which is obviously a really exciting time for them, what sort of areas can they expect to be in after they graduate? Maybe some previous stories?
Well, I mean, the primary one I'd say is actually doing the district nurse role.
Yeah,
it does, obviously, with the skills you obtain, it opens up a huge amount of doors. But primarily you want to be a district nurse, so going for the district nursing role. You can become team leaders, so leading and coordinating the whole of the district nursing sort of remit. You can do advanced study to get your ACP qualification, which is Advanced Care Practitioner. And because of the amount of things you've covered within your district nursing course, all you have to do is an extra bit of dissertation, which isn't huge really when you think about it. You can be a community matron, you can be practice advanced as clinical assessor, so you go to a GP surgery, do all those sort of things. And there's a huge amount you can do. And apparently you can also become a university lecturer. So there you go. Who would have thought that? Yeah.
So before we go on to chat a bit more about yourself and your journey sort of so far, is there anything else you'd like to say about the course?
It's worth it. It's really important course to get under your belt if you're into the community. So, if you like community nursing, this will help round you in ways you've never expected. It's a very reflective course. So things you never knew about yourself, you suddenly discover, and then you don't actually stop reflecting on yourself. Sometimes you wish you could, but you analyze everything you do and make it relevant to the task, problem, project, whatever you've got at hand. So it's definitely worth it to change you as a human being as well as a practitioner.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's really interesting. And now we're going to have a bit about chat about yourself. Something I'd really like to do on the podcast is learn more about the lecturers and the staff members. Good. So could you tell us a bit about your journey before the university?
So my journey before, as I said a little while ago, apparently I can talk for England, is you don't necessarily have to have done your level 6 to do the course. So I actually did my nursing as a diploma student all those years ago, 20 plus years ago. It was just the best 3 years of my life, learning how to take care of people properly, And all the minutiae. So then I finally graduated, but not with a degree, and got on to care of the elderly, which it was called in those days. Now it's the older adults, and basically just enjoyed every minute of that. Eventually, I got into community because that's where all the old people are generally, and it turns out I really like nursing old people. And then eventually did my district nursing course in 2014. So yeah. 10 years of district nursing, and I left district nursing itself only in August 2024.
Okay, so very recently in practice then.
So that's when I came here.
What was it that made you want to come here then?
I think I'd been sort of on my soapbox for quite a while about how it was such an important role, and no one really sort of valued it. Like, people who work it value it, but people who don't. So I really wanted to sort of try and raise the profile, and I thought potentially, they had a job opening, but potentially having more of a platform to try and really boost the district nursing role might help with recruitment, retention, all those things. Because currently, the district nursing world, we had 8,000 district nurses prior to COVID. Now we're down to about 4. So it's had a huge slash. So I just want to try and get more in so we can support the ones who are in practice. It's just to try and help the greater good. So I had to sort of realign my passion, because obviously nursing is my passion. Yeah. And sort of coming out of that remit, which is very weird. So I'm still in that transition of realising that I don't nurse people every day. It's very weird. Yeah. But that's what bank shifts are for. Yeah.
So I'm sure, your role now has changed very differently to what it was, say, 2 years ago. So for you don't necessarily have a typical day as such, I guess. It's very different.
Yeah, so with district nursing, you didn't have a typical day, but neither with this, actually. I mean, it's obviously more admin intensive. I've never replied to so many emails. So there is that, but you don't have the same day twice. Like I was saying, when the district nursing course is a bit quiet, then I go and help out on the adult nursing one. It was sort of, you have to think on your feet for a lot of things. And if you're trying to set up a course, I'm trying to make it very sort of relevant, guest speakers we get, all that sort of thing. So you can make the learning as beneficial and as useful as you want it to be. So it is very different, but a lot more admin-y. So I do have to make sure that I've got my Fitbit on and I stand up more often.
So you sort of mentioned it there about, what sort of things you're doing now in this role. So have you been any sort of key challenges that you faced and you've overcome and maybe you've learned from?
Definitely transitioning from clinical practice to academia. That is a very different world, I can safely say. Although I'm teaching things I know, I'm doing it in a very different way with a lot of acronyms. I've learned more acronyms than I ever knew.
And then you've got all the ones at the university as well.
So then I've got the university ones, which are even more than the NHS ones. So who knew that was going to be a thing? But also on top of that, you have to, sort of put your money where your mouth is and actually be able to study yourself. So I've had to start the PG. I'm enjoying it. But I've had to start the PG CAP for higher education. So, I'm learning as well as teaching those. But then you have to go and mark essays. Like, you're suddenly a responsible adult and have to mark the essays rather than just write them and complain about writing it. Yeah. So the whole thing is a massive learning curve.
But loving it.
Loving it, definitely. Wouldn't change it for the world at this point.
So you say how much you're loving the role and you're really enjoying it. So has there been any moments so far that you're most proud of?
I got to watch. So when my old hat on, when I was in sort of the practice element, I would support district nurse students on the practice side of things. So I got to see my student that I'd mentored the year before graduate. Yeah. And then one of my friends who'd done the course as well at the same time as my student graduate. And seeing their faces from the stage was just so wonderful. I cannot explain how much I loved it. So watching them actually get their goals, because it is hard work, and generally, on the whole, mums with children, so they've got to figure out when they're going to write their essays, which is usually midnight, that sort of thing. And to see them like have gone through all of that, changed from being the sort of more sort of blinkered practitioner that sort of had the policies, procedures, and that was that, to this wider, more holistic person. It's just wonderful to see. It's the best thing in the world. And I just found out one of the students that I've currently got now has secured her first proper district nursing role job. Yeah. So that was also wonderful. So it's just basically seeing the fruits of everyone's labour, primarily theirs, come to fruition. It's wonderful.
That's great. So the campus that we have here at university is, I think, quite pretty cool. So have you got like a favourite spot that you like to go on in the campus?
I spend a lot of time in the health and wellbeing building. I actually quite like hanging out in the library. It's quite quiet. You can think about what you need to focus on. But then you've also got the snazzy waterfront. So actually I like all of them because, they all serve their separate purpose. Yeah, no, I like all of it. Sorry, there's
that's good. That's good.
I like all of it.
So we are, of course, the University of Suffolk, proudly in Suffolk. So have you got any favourite spots in Suffolk?
In Suffolk?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we only moved up here just before COVID, so we're sort of still discovering the world. I know that my 6-year-old would say that it's Felixstowe. But I quite like the walk under the big bridge in Ipswich. There's like a nice walk you can do along the river.
Okay, yeah.
And that's probably my favourite place to hang out, if I'm not going to lie. Probably with the dog.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I'm very naturey, outdoory person, so you're not going to get anything too dramatic. No nightlife stories from me.
So I know you've listened to some of the podcasts before, so you'll know that our final question is our answer one, ask one question.
Yeah.
So you're going to answer a question from the previous guest. So the question we got for you is, what would you improve on campus?
I don't know. I find the campus is pretty good.
Any specialist equipment that you'd like to bring in that maybe we haven't got at the moment?
For district nursing itself, no. But I feel potentially adding on to the VR equipment and the programs and packages that you can get for them might be helpful for pre-reg students, because obviously you can sort of get more A&P type things, so they can get really more interactive and that sort of thing, which would also help the district nursing students on the holistic assessment side of things, because you can have more visualization of what's happening with the body and that sort of thing. So potentially more investment into those sort of services would be great, but equipment-wise, we're good. I only have small cohorts,
you only have to look. Fine. You only have to look around Health Wellbeing to see some of the pretty cool facilities. It feels like every hospital. Sometimes if you walk in there, you think you're expecting to see people walking around the patients.
More than what I expected, especially from my university days, with libraries and what it felt like chisel and flint. That was us, doing old-fashioned. Even seeing a student with their laptop open typing still throws me. I'm like, you're doing work while I'm speaking? I can't do it. I'm too old for that.
So have you got a question for the next guest?
I do. It's a bit of a nerdy one, but that's probably because I'm doing PG Chem.
No, we like that. I definitely like nerdy stuff. I'm a nerd.
If you had a complete freedom to design an assessment for your course, what would you do and why? So if you had no red tape, what would you do as an assessment for the particular course that you're setting up?
That's a pretty good question.
Yeah,
that's a really good
I've
question.
I've discovered the red tape. That's why I was like, oh,
yeah.
I had all these plans.
Yeah,
so
that's good. That's one of the more. That's a really unique question that we've had so far. That's brilliant. So looking forward to asking the next.
That's PG Cap one.
We're looking forward
for that. Or if not, then what's your favourite Bruce Springsteen song?
Yeah, we'll go with that as well. Thanks for joining us, Stacy, today. It's been a really interesting conversation. I'm sure those that are listening have found it interesting as well. And if they like what they've heard, then reach out.
Yeah,
and
always. I'm happy to give you a career path. I can happily project you in any way.
So until next time, it's goodbye from Stacy.
Thanks.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Student Experience podcast. If you would like to be a future guest, email studentexperienceteam@uos.ac.uk or follow the links to our application form through our Brightspace page. You can also reach out to us through our Instagram page @UOS_student experience.